Welcome to Life Stories, where we dive deep into the complexities of life, love, and the lessons we learn along the way. Today's story is about the difficult journey of balancing family expectations with personal boundaries. It's a tale of love, sacrifice, and the hard decisions that shape our future. Sometimes, doing what's right means setting boundaries, even when it hurts. Join us as we explore the emotional challenges faced by one couple who had to draw the line with family, all while discovering the strength in prioritizing their own happiness. Subscribe to the channel to start the story today. It was a bright, crisp morning when I returned from a week-long international business trip. The excitement of seeing my husband, Jake, after so many days apart should have been the highlight of my day. But something else was waiting to greet me, something I never could have imagined. I had just walked through the door, suitcase in hand, when my phone buzzed. It was my mother-in-law, Linda. She had called a few times during my trip, but I hadn't had the energy to respond. Juggling meetings, dinners, and the exhausting tasks that come with running a business abroad. This time, however, I noticed her call was followed by an unusually triumphant tone in her voicemail. Her words were a strange mix of pride and something I couldn't quite place. "Harper, I just wanted to tell you. I found something incredible, you know. That $40 you've been saving? Well, I used it to fund my holiday. It's really been a wonderful experience." I stood frozen, the phone still in my hand. The words didn't make sense. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of what she had just said. $40? What was she talking about? We certainly didn't have that kind of money lying around. Not without a specific plan or purpose for it. I had never seen that kind of amount in our accounts. And there was no way I would have stashed away such an amount without telling Jake. He and I were both meticulous about our finances. A small misstep could affect everything. And we had worked too hard to let anything slip through the cracks. After several moments of confusion, I called Jake, hoping to get some clarity. When he picked up, his voice was tired but calm, as if he knew what I was about to say. "Harper, I think I know what this is about," he said. "That $40. I withdrew it from the bank last week. But it wasn't for savings. It was for a different reason altogether." I listened as Jake explained what had happened. The money had been withdrawn to settle some of Linda's outstanding debts that had been spiraling out of control for months. As I listened to Jake recount the details, the weight of the situation grew heavier. Linda had gotten herself into financial trouble, and Jake, in an attempt to support her, had taken the cash out of our savings to help her. But instead of using the money to pay off her debts, Linda had used it on an extravagant overseas holiday, one that she had enjoyed without a single care for the source of the funds. I was stunned. My emotions were a whirlwind of frustration, confusion, and disbelief. Why had she taken money that wasn't hers? And why had she felt entitled to it, as though it were her right? I tried to calm myself, but the more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Linda hadn't just taken money from us, she had taken our trust. And trust, as I had learned over the years, was one of the most fragile things in any relationship. It could shatter in an instant, leaving nothing but the debris of past mistakes. After Jake explained that he had withdrawn the cash to cover Linda's debts and ensure that our business funds weren't impacted, I tried to make sense of the decision. It was clear that Jake had acted out of love and compassion for his mother, even though she had a long history of mismanaging money and making unreasonable demands. But love, as I had learned time and time again, doesn't always make the right choices. And it certainly didn't make everything okay. I couldn't shake the feeling that Linda had crossed a line. While I understood Jake's intentions, I couldn't help but feel as though she had taken advantage of his kindness. Her attitude, especially when she had casually mentioned the $40 and her wonderful trip, felt like a slap in the face. She had acted without regard for the consequences of her actions, and it left me feeling helpless. What was I supposed to do now? As I sat in the quiet of our apartment, my mind raced with questions. Why had Linda acted this way? Why couldn't she understand that money, especially money that didn't belong to her, couldn't just be taken without repercussions? I thought of the sacrifices Jake and I had made to build our life and our business. The long nights, the endless planning, all of it seemed meaningless when faced with someone who seemed to take everything we had for granted. The more I reflected on the situation, the more I realized that Linda's actions weren't just about money. They were a reflection of something deeper, a sense of entitlement. A belief that she deserved things without considering the impact on others. And in that moment, I couldn't help but feel pity for her. What had led Linda to this point in her life? Why was she so focused on her own desires and whims, even at the expense of her family? Had she always been like this? Or had something in her life shaped her into the person she was today? I knew I couldn't answer those questions right away. But I was beginning to understand something important. This wasn't just about money. This was about love, boundaries, and the difficult work of balancing one's own well-being with the needs of others. It was about the hard lessons life had to offer, lessons that weren't always easy to learn. As I prepared for the next part of this ongoing saga, I knew things would only get more complicated. But for now, I would have to trust that time would offer some clarity, and that eventually, we would find a way to deal with the emotional and financial fallout from Linda's reckless actions. The road ahead felt uncertain. But it was a road we would have to travel together. The weeks that followed that shocking phone call were filled with an overwhelming sense of tension. I tried to bury my anger and confusion beneath the surface, focusing on work and the logistics of our upcoming move abroad. But Linda's actions had already left an indelible mark on our lives. And as much as I tried to move past it, I couldn't. Every time I saw Jake, I noticed the weight on his shoulders, the exhaustion in his eyes. We both knew that we needed to confront Linda. But Jake, always the peacekeeper, was hesitant. He had always been the one to smooth things over, to diffuse the arguments and put the family's needs first. It had worked for years. But now, I could see the toll it was taking on him. He had become trapped in a cycle of placating Linda, trying to appease her, even when she didn't deserve it. One evening, after another long day of work, Jake sat down beside me on the couch, his face etched with frustration. "Harper, I don't know what to do anymore," he confessed, his voice low. "She keeps calling, asking for more help, and I just don't know how to say no to her." I could feel the sadness in his words, the resignation. He had tried to be a good son, but it was becoming clear that his efforts were only enabling Linda's behavior. "I understand, Jake," I replied gently, "but we can't keep letting her take advantage of us. It's not healthy for either of us." Jake sighed, his hand running through his hair in frustration. "I know, but what if she needs us? She's always been there for me, and I feel like I owe her." His words stung. The weight of responsibility was something I understood all too well. But I couldn't help but wonder, was this obligation, this sense of indebtedness, something he truly felt? Or was it a pattern he had been following his whole life? The next day, Linda called again. This time, the tone in her voice was more frantic, more desperate. She had always been persistent in her requests. But now there was an urgency to her words. "Jake, I need you to help me again," she said, her voice quivering. "I've got a party coming up, and I need a new dress. You know how it is. I can't show up in old clothes. People will talk. You need to help me." I could hear the entitlement in her words. It was as if she believed that we were obligated to meet her every need, no matter how unreasonable. It was a feeling I had become all too familiar with. But this time, I wasn't going to let it slide. "Linda, we've talked about this before," I said firmly, my voice steady. "We can't keep giving you money for things like this. Our budget is tight, and we have to focus on our future. We can't keep enabling this behavior." Jake, who had been listening in on the call, stepped in, trying to mediate. "Mom, we can't do this right now. We need to focus on our own plans. And we can't keep taking on your financial burdens." But Linda wasn't having it. She pushed back, her voice sharp with irritation. "You two are always so lavish with your own spending. Why can't I have a little luxury, too? You don't need it all." I could feel the frustration building inside me. She was refusing to acknowledge the reality of our situation. She saw our success as something to envy, as something to take from, without understanding the sacrifices it had taken to get there. Jake and I weren't living in excess, we were building a business. A future. And yet, Linda couldn't see that. Linda, we can't continue like this, I said, my tone firm but calm. You need to start taking responsibility for your own finances. We can't keep bailing you out. Jake's silence spoke volumes. He didn't know how to say it, but I could feel the weight of his internal conflict. He loved his mother, but he was starting to understand that his attempts to help were only making things worse. I thought about the years that had passed since we first started our business. Jake and I had worked tirelessly to build something that was ours. Something that would sustain us and give us the life we dreamed of. But every time we took a step forward, it seemed like Linda would pull us back, forcing us to deal with her problems. And yet, as much as I resented it, I couldn't help but feel a pang of sympathy. Linda wasn't just financially irresponsible, she was lonely, insecure, and desperate for attention. I realized, in that moment, that her demands were a cry for help. But was it our job to answer every time? Could we keep sacrificing our own peace for her sake? As Jake and I talked about what to do next, the answer seemed clear. We couldn't continue to enable her. But how do you draw the line when family is involved? How do you protect your own future while still showing compassion? The difficult truth was that we were walking a fine line between empathy and self-preservation. And it wasn't always easy to navigate. But I knew one thing for sure. We couldn't keep living like this. The tension in our home had been steadily rising. But things reached a boiling point after Jake and I had made the difficult decision to set boundaries with Linda. For weeks, we had discussed the idea of helping her, of finding ways to support her without enabling her self-destructive behavior. But each time we thought we had a solution, Linda would test our resolve again. It was exhausting, both physically and emotionally, to keep up with her relentless demands. One evening, after a particularly draining day, Jake came to me with a suggestion that shocked me. We need to set some firm limits, he said quietly, looking more tired than I had ever seen him. I've been thinking about it. And maybe it's time we take away her credit card. She's just not using it responsibly. And I can't keep footing the bill for everything. We're not her bank. The words were hard to hear. And even harder to say. But Jake was right. Linda had long since stopped respecting the boundaries we'd set. And her constant demands were weighing on both of us. The guilt I felt about taking such a step was overwhelming. It felt wrong to cut her off completely. To make a decision that would impact her life so drastically. But the truth was, we had already been sacrificing so much for her. And there was nothing left to give. I think you're right, I said, my voice quiet with the weight of the decision. But how do we even begin? She'll never understand. Jake sighed deeply, clearly weary. I don't know. But we can't keep going like this. I've tried to help her. But every time I give in, it only makes things worse. I can't keep enabling her. It was painful to hear Jake speak like this. He had always been the one to protect her. The one who would do anything for his mother. No matter the cost. To see him in such a fragile state, torn between loyalty to his family and the reality of our own life, made my heart ache. The next day, Linda called again, her voice filled with that familiar sense of entitlement. This time, it wasn't a dress or a party, it was something much more urgent. I need your help, Jake, she said, almost pleading. I'm behind on my bills. And I can't manage without your support. I don't know what I'm going to do. I could hear the desperation in her voice. But it didn't change the fact that we had already given her so much. Linda had made choices that led her to this point. Choices that she was now asking us to fix. But how could we keep bailing her out? How many times could we step in before it started to affect our own future? Jake hesitated, then replied, his voice firm. Mom, I can't help you with this anymore. We've given you enough chances. And we can't keep doing it. You need to take responsibility for your own finances. There was a long pause. And I could hear the shock in Linda's voice. What do you mean? You can't just leave me like this. But Jake held his ground. We can't keep this up. Mom, I've tried to help you. but it's just not working. You need to figure this out on your own. It was a painful conversation. One that left us both emotionally drained. I could hear Linda's frustration and disbelief on the other end of the line. And I couldn't help but feel guilty. I had never wanted to be the bad guy. But there was no other choice. We had to draw the line somewhere. And this was it. As the days passed, Jake and I continued to wrestle with the fallout of our decision. Linda's calls became more infrequent. But I could still feel her presence in our lives. Like a shadow that refused to fade. The emotional toll it had taken on us both was undeniable. And it seemed like there was no easy way to move forward. The guilt was something I couldn't shake. I had grown up in a family where you took care of your own. Where you helped when needed. No matter the cost. But this was different. Linda wasn't just asking for help, she was demanding it. Without any regard for the consequences. And the more we gave, the more she took. It was a cycle that we could no longer afford to continue. Still, I couldn't completely silence the voice in my head that whispered, "What if she truly needs us?" It was a question that haunted me. One that I couldn't easily answer. The love I felt for Jake, for our future together, was deep, but it was clear that we couldn't build that future if we kept being pulled back into the chaos of Linda's world. The days went by, and as Jake and I prepared for our upcoming move abroad, the weight of the situation lingered. We had decided to leave, to start fresh, but I couldn't shake the feeling that we were leaving something behind, something unresolved. Something we could never fix. As Jake and I boarded the plane to our new life abroad, I couldn't help but reflect on everything we had left behind. The tangled web of family expectations, the overwhelming guilt, and the emotional exhaustion of trying to balance our dreams with the demands of others. It all seemed so far away now. Yet, there was a part of me that knew it would always be a part of our journey. We had made the hard decision to set boundaries. To stop enabling behaviors that were draining our energy and resources. But that didn't mean the love for family disappeared. It simply meant we had learned a profound lesson about self-care. About knowing when to give and when to let go. We couldn't keep sacrificing our own future just to maintain a sense of obligation. The road ahead was uncertain. But it was ours to walk. And for the first time in a long time, I felt hopeful. Jake and I had a new chapter waiting for us. One filled with endless possibilities for our business, our dreams, and our family, our little family. We had made the decision to prioritize our well-being and success, knowing that we couldn't pour from an empty cup. As we settled into our new life, I realized that sometimes, the hardest decisions are the ones that lead us to our greatest growth. The experience with Linda, though painful, had given us clarity and strength. It had taught us that love isn't about blindly giving without boundaries, it's about nurturing yourself. So that you can truly show up for those who deserve your love. Thank you for following our journey. If you want to stay updated on more life stories and lessons learned, make sure to subscribe to our channel for new videos. Life has a way of surprising us. And we're excited to share the next chapter with you all.